This is a story for the lads about Moshe Leib of Sosov that is related to Pesach. Moshe Leib of Sosov, as we last learned, is really the character who was presented in Peretz's famous story. In English is known as If Not Higher, in Hebrew Im Lo Lamala Mizeh, a very famous story about the Rebbe of Nemirov. As we pointed out the last time we met, there never was a Rebbe of Nemirov, never a Hasidic Rebbe of Nemirov. In any case, the story in Hasidic sources is really about Rabbi Moshe Leib of Sosov. And Rabbi Moshe Leib of Sosov, in that story, is doing an incredible act of tzedakah, an incredible act of kindness disguised as a peasant in order to help a poor woman who, in one form of the story, has just given birth to a child and is all alone, and in another form is an old woman and she has no money and it's cold, and Rav Moshe Leib of Sosov, instead of showing up in shul to say Slichos, has disappeared, and the Hasidim think that who knows where he is, probably in heaven saying Slichos in heaven. In any case, we dealt with that story last time, but I review it in order that you better understand who the person is, who the hero of this story is, because he doesn't want you to know it's about him at all. And this story is once again about tzedakah, but we'll get to Pesach. It starts the way I want to tell it to you. It starts with Reb Uriah Strelisk, also another famous Hasidic Rebbe, whom we can't speak about everybody at one time. But Reb Uriah Strelisk was also a big Baal tzedakah, also a person who gave much charity to the poor, to the bereft. And he was going around from town to town, and he comes into Sosov, and it's late at night, and he sees there's a light on in Rav Moshe Leib's house, and he comes to him, and he asks Rav Moshe Leib if he can give something. He's collecting money. I think in the story it was for Pidyon Shvuyim, to rescue somebody who had been sent to jail, a way that the nobles had by capturing a Jew and then ransoming off to the Jewish community. And Rav Moshe Leib of Sosov, he said, it's night. I have a minhag that at the end of the day, any money left in the house, I give away to Aniyim right away. I don't keep money. maybe the poor person needs it tonight. So I have no money for you. And he saw then that the Rebbe of Strelisk was so downfallen by that, he won't be able to collect money. Nobody else is awake. He has, So Rav Moshe Leib said to him, I see you're downcast, and I can't help you. I can't cheer you up in the way you would be cheered up having succeeded in raising money for the needy. But there's another way that I learned. I don't remember who he learned it from in the story. I think I once knew. I learned perhaps from his own Rebbe, Rebbe Shmelk of Nickelsburg. But when you have nothing to give somebody else, you can always give him joy. And you can always give him joy by dancing for him. So I'll dance for you. Now, Rav Moshe Leib of Sosov was one of the great dancers among Hasidic Rebbes. I mean, there's no official Hall of Fame for dancers, but there are stories about his capacity to bring joy and to dance with such a zest and such a liveliness that you could not be happy when he danced. And he began to sing, and Reb Uriah Strelisk began to clamp, and he was dancing, and he was dancing, and he was dancing, until Reb Uri began to smile. So, that you know. Now, we come to Pesach. To come to Pesach, you have to know something. That when Reb Shmelk of Nikolsburg, the Rebbe of Moshe Leib of Sosov, died, Moshe Leib fell into a great sadness. He had no Rebbe. He was a Rebbe, but even the Rebbe needs a Rebbe, and he had no Rebbe. And then people told him he should really go to meet, at least spend a Shabbos at least in the presence, in the company of a Reb Eli Melech of Lizhensk, also as his Rebbe Reb Shmelka, also a chassid who had been a chassid in the court of the Mezritcher Magid. So finally he said okay, and he went for Shabbos, and it was fine. And then Shabbos kept moving along, and it got better than fine. It was better, and it was better. And by the time that Sudash Shlishit, Shal Sudas, came around, Moshe Leib was in an ecstasy. He had found a Rebbe, Reb Eli Melech of Lizhensk. He had found another Rebbe, a Rebbe who could bring him joy, a Rebbe perhaps who could even bring him to dance, to sing. And while they're sitting at Sudash Lishit, Reb Eli Melech of Lizhensk invited him to give the Dvar Torah at Sudash Lishit, to say words of Torah at Sudash Lishit. And this is what he said. It was Parshas Bo. And in Parshas Bo, of course, we have the story of the first Pesach Mitzrayim, in which God passed over the house of the Jew, the houses of the Jew. And that from that, in English, we have the word Passover. We're celebrating. But the word pass over is, in Hebrew, is Pesach. And the word Pesach means to skip, or extended to that, it also means to dance. For example, Eliyahu Hanavi in the great confrontation with the false prophets on Har HaKarmel, Eliyahu says to the people, Ad matai atem poschim al shnei hasipim. How long, in colloquial English you'd say, how long will you sit on the fence? If God is the cod, l'chu acharav, then go after him. And if the Baal, go after him. You've got to make a choice. You can't leave, as Yozel of Navardik, the Alta of Navardik used to say, if you tell people, you can't say to them, if you're going to worship God, but if you're going to worship the Baal, so at least continue to worship God. Because if you give people a choice, they'll always stay sitting on the fence. But the real translation is not my colloquial of sitting on the fence. It's skipping from here to there, or it's dancing. Like in Yiddish, we say, you can't dance at two chasanas. We can't tanzen of beide chasanas. You can't dance at two chasanas at the same time. You have to be at one or the other. So Rabbi Eli Melech, Moshe Leib of Sosov got up and he said the following. He, commenting on it said, God passed over, I'm just giving the English here, the houses of the Jews. Now, if you say he passed over the houses of the Jews, it should be written Me'al, right? From above, okay? Above the roofs. But it does not say that. It says that God passed al. God passed al on the roofs. And Moshe Leib said, When God came in, and now we're going to go back to the verb of Pesach as dancing. When God came into Mitzrayim, and he's going around in Mitzrayim, and it's a land full of idolatry and abomination and cruelty and evil. And he then comes to the house of a Jew. A house of a Jew. And he feels holiness. He feels truth. And he is, as it were, God so joyous that he's Pesach al, but on the house. God dances on the roof. God dances on the roof, and he says, of course, God speaks in Yiddish, and God dances on the roof, and he's dancing to a song that he sings, which the words are, Da voint the Yid, Da voint the Yid. A Jew lives here. A Jew lives here. There is holiness in this land of abomination, but here a Jew lives. And God is so joyous. And Moshe Leib, in telling his story, begins to get ecstatic. And he jumps up on the table, something known to occasionally happen in Hasidic stories. He jumps on the table in front of him, the table on which he was sitting, and he begins to dance. A dance of Moshe Leib. And he dances, and he's singing the niggin that God sings, Da voint the Yid, Da voint the Yid. Here, Moshe Leib is ecstatic because he knows in Lezhensk he is no longer without a Rebbe. He is no longer without a teacher. Da voint the Yid, Da voint the Yid. And this, of course, is an iteration of the famous, but a true iteration of the famous song, Yiddish song, right, where the Rebbe dances, Sha still macht nicht gereder, der Rebbe geht schon tanzen wieder. Be quiet. The Rebbe is about to go to dance, and it's a long, beautiful niggin, and it's Moshe Leib dancing, and he's dancing, and he's dancing, and he's found the Rebbe, and he's taken us to that moment on the night of Pesach, that moment which takes us, we begin to remove ourselves away from all the travails and all the tzarot and all the sufferings we have been in because we're living in Mitzrayim, and Jews had lived in Mitzrayim in many, many, many different Mitzrayims. And they're beginning to dance because liberation comes, because they found the house of a Jew, and they found the house in which they can be danced, in which they can dance. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bless us with the joy of freedom, the joy of finding a Jewish home, the joy of holiness, the joy of tzedakah in a world of taking, the joy of giving in a world of taking. A good Pesach, a happy Pesach, a Chag Kosher v'Sameach.